local party.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Darkling Chronicles. I've got some ghost stories for you. Some creepy tales from Reddit. I am actually compiling all of my ghost stories at the moment. And there's so many from over the last almost 2 years now. I suppose actually probably about 18 months. That I think I could probably just go back through and read them all from the start. Because half of you lot haven't been here since the start and you haven't even heard them. And I bet you people don't actually remember them from way back then anyway. And I know it's only a year and a half ago, but so much has happened since then. I'm going to get straight into it, but I hope you've had a lovely week. I'm feeling very sleepy and relaxed tonight. So hopefully I can keep you entertained and not bore you to death with my voice. I hope you've had a great week. And if you haven't, this is our time now. We're just going to chill together. Don't worry. Forget about every single problem you've had because this lovely little almost an hour, I don't know how long this is going to be, is just for you to chill. And if you're on your way home or you're on your way to somewhere, please have a safe journey. So we're going straight in with the Reddit stories tonight. Now this first Reddit story is from someone called Red Lady 0227, and she wrote it 9 months ago, and she says, I'd say the creepiest ghost story I've ever been told was courtesy of my parents, believe it or not. Back in the late 70s, a few months before they got married, they went to a secluded wooded area that was basically like a lover's lane area for people in the know back then. Late one night, my parents were up there all alone, and they were laid out on my dad's station wagon's front bucket seat. Filth, innit? Absolute filth, these stories. My dad sat up, intending to get his cigarettes off the dash, and just kind of froze and never lay back down again. That's so cliche, isn't it? Like, we've just finished. So American, like cliche, just better grab my cigarettes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. She says, my mother asked him what was wrong. After a few moments of him not moving or speaking, he finally managed to tell my mum to not make any sudden movements and to sit up and look out the front window. My mum told me that when she looked out of the front window, she saw what was clearly an older woman with what appeared to be grey hair in a bun. The woman had literally walked up to the front bumper of the station wagon. She was just standing motionless, staring at them. She was wearing a dark-coloured older style dress that was last worn regularly around probably 1880 to 1920 at the latest. My parents said that she looked as solid as any of us, but the only problem was her feet were at least a foot off the ground. I asked if they saw her face, and my mum and dad always told me it was too dark to determine facial features when they first saw her. They were terrified and took off without even getting fully dressed, and I don't blame them. About 2 weeks later, my mum was waiting tables at a local restaurant, and the sheriff and his wife came in for lunch. My mum flat out asked the sheriff's wife about the woman, and she's put in brackets when the wife was paying their bill on the way out, but didn't mention that the feet weren't on the ground. The sheriff's wife told my mum that they'd got woken up by at least 3 to 5 calls a year from people stating that they'd seen this older woman matching that exact description on the road that she'd been down to get to the secluded wooded area they saw her at. According to the sheriff's wife, about half of the callers thought it was an elderly woman that had escaped from a small nursing home about 3 to 4 miles from that area, but that wasn't the case at all. The other half of the callers called her what she was, a ghost or spirit. The sheriff himself never saw her, according to my parents. The city town was also a small farming community back in the late 70s, so everyone knew everyone. My parents divorced back in the early 90s, and this one story is the only one that they never disagreed on, nor changed any part of it till the day they both passed away 7 years apart. That's a pretty cool story. And I did go look at the forum, and someone did say, well, how did they see that her feet was off the ground if she was in front of the car, like right up close? The person didn't reply to that one, but I would imagine it's probably quite obvious to tell if someone's levitating. I don't know. We just can't we? We get a sense of how tall someone is. I think if they just thought she was that tall, her body proportions would probably make sense anyway. But she could have been like moving around as well, and it could have just been a bit random. I'm not au fait with wagons, but I would imagine they're up quite high. So I wonder if you can scooch forward and look down to see. I don't know. But someone else did write, well, why did they tell the sheriff's wife? And they essentially just wrote back saying it was like a small town and her mum just knew that she could, kind of thing. It seems a little bit abrupt, doesn't it? Just to like outright ask the sheriff's wife, and the sheriff's right there. But I guess because she's a woman, she asked the woman. I don't know. Weird. This next story is from someone called Silent Tomatillo 167. And they say, okay, I'll tell my ghost story. They say, growing up, we lived in a typical suburban community in a house built in the 60s. Our family were the second family that lived there. My brothers were away at college, and my mum was a registered nurse who worked the night shift. So at 10 p.m, it was just me and my father in the house. I was laying in my bedroom on the second floor watching TV. I remember it was China Beach. I've never heard of China Beach. I don't know what that is. And I could hear my dad in the basement hammering at some project at his workbench. During a commercial break, I was looking through my partially open bedroom door into the dimly lit hallway, illuminated only by the light cast by a lamp in my parents' bedroom. And I swear, as I'm looking, a dark black shadow shaped like person, shoulders, head, slowly goes down the hallway from the right to left and out of sight down the hall. It felt weird. I'm being a 10-year-old kid. It felt like the best course of action was to dive under my covers. A few moments later, I heard my dad hammering again. Maybe what I saw was just him. So I gathered myself and ran downstairs as fast as I could to the basement. I asked my father if he had been upstairs in the last 20 minutes or so. He hadn't. He asked me why I asked him, and I croaked out, "Oh, no reason." Over the next few weeks, I told my brothers, who didn't believe me. So I let the story rest. And nothing like that ever happened to me again in that house. Maybe it was a figment of my imagination, or so I thought. Fast forward about 5 years, our family was at a restaurant for dinner, and I recounted my tale to my father. This was the first time he had heard it. And unlike everyone else I had previously told, he listened attentively and without judgment. At the end, I pointed that out and asked if he believed me. I won't forget his answer. He said, "Yes, I do believe you. When it is late at night and I'm laying in bed, I often see them looking into the room at me." Bleh. Gross. Move. Why are you still there? Some people can't move. Money is an issue. It's just a nightmare. Now, just a conversational point. If you were to buy a haunted house, obviously you didn't know it's haunted, so you're really excited, you buzz in, you don't take a dog with you to the viewing, which is on you because everyone should. So you have no idea, you're not like a sensey kind of person. You can't walk in and just think, yep, I'm noping out here. This place is haunted as fuck. You've walked in, you love it. You might get a little bit of an eerie sense, but you think maybe it's just a decoration because you need to like update things. The sink is like green and the bathtub's purple or something. And then you stay there and drawers start opening and shit starts happening and it is wild. Are you going to A, think, nah, I can't stay here. I'm going to do whatever I can just to sell this house and get out of here? Or are you B, going to turn it into some kind of money-making machine? Because I'm telling you right now, you might not know, but I found this out from Chris, the paranormal Viking. He goes and does like investigations. Go follow him if you're not already. He said that there's people who look for these opportunities to buy these houses because he knows that they are money-making magnets. People pay £100 and something each just to stay, if they're going in a group of 10 or they're going in a group of 5 or whatever, just to stay in a haunted location. All of a sudden, you're making more money than you would in Airbnb. And there are actual ghost and paranormal groups. You know, he's actually part of one, the Hampshire one. And there's groups that you can join to go and do investigations with people or to have like-minded people. So you would have a constant flow of dollar coming in. And you don't even have to do anything. The ghost is doing everything for you. Turning on the water, twizzling a few taps on, throwing stuff at people. It's brilliant. You get paid for the ghost's violence. I mean, it's not the opportunity you probably thought you were going to get setting up a business, but it is one that is a lucrative business because they say to set up a business is something that's never going to stop. Death never stops. It's either funerals, death stuff, babies, weddings, none of that stops. So I think it's probably a smart investment. I'm going to go with B. I'm going to go that I'm just going to pimp out my house. I'm going to pimp out my house. Come stay, give me your money. I won't be like a dick about it though, because I think people just rip people off for the sake of it in this world. And I do actually hate that. Obviously, I'm half joking right now, but some people would charge like hundreds of pounds. I'm just like, no, come and have a good experience. I'll put a little spread on. You give us 60 quid each or whatever. I'll put a little spread on for you. If the ghost throws juice at you, it's not my fault though. It's not my problem. If they throw a jam donut at you that I've left here, it's your issue. You're going to have to get the stain out of your top, not me. Let me know in the comments what you're doing, A or B. Thank you very much. If there is a wild card C option, please do let me know what that is, because I would obviously love to read it. This next story is from someone called No Contribution 730, and they wrote it 9 months ago. And they say, my co-worker's wife claims to be a medium. I've always been pretty skeptical about the legitimacy of mediums, but this experience made me a believer, if I'm being honest. This isn't the creepiest story out there, but I've never personally experienced something like this, so it gives me chills. One day, my fire department had a family dinner night. I noticed that one of the new guys sparked up a conversation with my co-worker, whose wife claims to be the medium. I didn't hear the conversation, but I watched them talk until suddenly the new guy turns pale and opens his eyes real big. He left the room and I followed him to see what happened. He goes on to tell me that the medium, so I'm guessing that his wife is sat with them while they're having a conversation here, and they haven't really explained that very well, but so essentially he goes on to tell me that my co-worker's wife, who is the medium, tells him that there is a man following him around. The medium thought it was a family member at first, but she soon realized it was an apparition after watching its behavior and noticing that nobody was interacting with it. She described the apparition as an older man with a beard, blue eyes, and a tattoo on his hand. She said he was wearing a red flannel with blue jeans, a large belt buckle, and cowboy boots. My co-worker went on to say that this description was his grandfather, who passed away 15 years ago. He said he was supposed to visit his grandfather several times when he was sick and dying, but never got the chance to, and it always carried weight on his shoulders because he didn't see him to say goodbye before passing. He said he knew it was real because he didn't have any digital photos of his grandfather, only developed photos that were tucked away with his personal items. He said his grandfather wore the same exact thing every day, which was the clothing that she described. On top of that, he was still new enough that no one knew anything about his family yet. He'd also never met my co-worker's wife, who's the medium. A few days later, I asked my co-worker about the incident, and that's when he told me that his wife is in fact a medium. He said she didn't like talking about it because it genuinely scares her, and she doesn't see apparitions very often. Personally, I felt that added to my belief that his experience was true because I knew my co-workers and his wife for years, and they never mentioned it. Again, not the creepiest of stories, but it made me a believer. This experience was so extreme for the new guy that he went out and joined a ghost hunting club and travels all over the country to experience haunted sites. He also mentioned that he did not believe in ghosts prior to this experience, and he's now 35 years old. He was 33 when it happened. This is a really cool one because there's no digital images of his grandfather anywhere, so there can be no accusations of this lady, this co-worker's wife, who isn't a medium, but they're calling her a medium. She just has the ability to do this stuff. There's no way that she, one, would probably want to go on anyone's site anyway and find this stuff out, but she couldn't have done it because they're not anywhere, they don't exist, because these pictures are with this guy's personal belongings. No wonder he has such strong belief now and thinks there is something. That experience would be enough to change anyone, especially when you are a skeptic, but you know damn well that there is no pictures of your granddad anywhere. It just goes to show, doesn't it? It's really cool. There is definitely something going on. Whether that's what we think it is, I don't know. We call it ghosts and we call it demons because it's easy for us to title it that way. Obviously, it gives us some kind of imagery in our mind then, and we know the expectation of what someone is talking about in a conversation. But what I think ghosts aren't actually what I think a lot of people think they are. But I know that people who are interested know that it's something to do with dimensions and prints of energy and stuff like that. There's so much to it that we don't know, but I guess we just call it these things because it's a lot easier for us to get our heads around, isn't it? This next story is from someone called Karmic Cat, and they say, my childhood best friend had moved into a house with her family in the early 80s. We were around 9 years old. A few weeks after they'd settled in, we'd go walking outside in the neighbourhood, sometimes pretty late because her mum worked nights and we were wild Gen Xers. One night, we see a boy around our age on top of the roof of a Hardee's restaurant that was on the end of her block, and we were screaming at him, telling him to get down because he's going to get hurt. But he just stands there and says nothing, just mute. So we go inside and tell the management about him being up there, and they come out and start hollering at him to get down. We see him everywhere after this, on our walks, almost like he's stalking us. We tried asking him his name and where he lived, but he never responded. So I figured we pissed him off because the night before we told the management and he'd got in trouble. And a month later, we meet this girl in the park who's like us, just a free roaming neighbourhood kid. And she asked us to come back to her house so we could play in her room, so we did. She lived just 4 houses down from my best friend's house. We get in there and we go inside, and as we're walking down the hallway to her room, I'm looking at the family photos on the wall. I get to this one large photo of the whole family, like the ones you'd take at Sears, and I recognise a boy in the photo. It's him. It's the creepy boy we keep seeing around the neighbourhood. So I tug on my friend's shirt and point at the picture. The look on her face is like, what the fuck? When we go into this girl's room, my best friend says to her, that boy in the picture out there, we see him around here all the time. The girl says, who? And we said, in the photo. She said, who? Show me. We go show her and point to him in the photo. She's looking at us like our heads are on fire. She says, that's my brother. He died a year ago. He got run over on his bike down by Hardee's. My best friend just yells, nope, and runs out the house. I stood there just completely numb and took off after her. I don't even think I said bye to that girl or anything. My only thing with this story is the management actually came out and told him off. Yet if they had any ghostly experiences with him, they probably would have been freaked out to go out there because they would have known that it was a boy that was a ghost and he wasn't actually real. So whether that night he was draining the energy from Hardee's because he actually wanted these 2 girls to see him because he knew that they were going to bump into his sister, and in some way she would then know that he's okay because they've said that they've seen him, you know? I think that's probably what that was. But it's weird that they saw this apparition, so that they all saw him and he was okay with them all seeing him. Very odd, but very cool. The next one is from Positron 2000, and they say, my family and I moved into a house in the suburbs. The windows were covered in foil. I thought nothing of it. My bedroom was next to the guest room / office. Years into living there, I heard my dad in the office on his massive leather office chair that has wheels early in the morning. The chair was on a plastic rug cover, so it would make all kinds of noises as it moved around. I got annoyed with how loud he was being at such an early time, and I barged into the office to ask him to stop, like the teenage brat that I was. Except he wasn't on there. The chair was totally empty and my dad had been sleeping. We got a puppy eventually and created him in that room. Many times in the middle of the night, I'd hear him making happy, playful sounds. One night I walked in and he was clawing at his cage, away from me, seemingly playing with something outside of his cage in the dark. The third instance was when I was in the room using the family computer. My right hand all of a sudden got freezing cold. This wasn't a circulation issue. I was young and this had never happened to me before and it hasn't happened since. I was suspicious about a ghost at that point, obviously, so I got the hell out of there. I imagined a ghost holding my hand. Cut to years later, when I'm an adult, having drinks with my mum, I bring up the weird stuff I experienced as a kid in that house, and she tells me never to mention it to my grandma because she would never want to come over. I'm like, okay, but why not? It's not like there's a reason to think you actually have a ghost in the house. My mum then tells me the owners before us had had a little son who died of cancer, and the foil was put up to let the family sleep during the day if the nights were hard. He must have wanted to play with the chair, my dog, and with me, just stuck in that room, and it breaks my heart. I've not experienced anything for decades now. My parents still live in that home. I believe that the little boy has finally moved on to his next adventure, and I hope he's at peace. What a sad but lovely story. As soon as there's a dog involved, I'm instantly like, oh God, please don't put the little baby in that room with the ghost. But in this case, it worked out well. I bet it was really lovely for that little boy to be able to play with the dog. We love that. We love that for the dog. We love that for the ghost boy. We love it for everyone. This next story is from Coffee Junkie, and And this person says, I was maybe 10 or 11 and lived in a duplex in Mass, front corner room of the house. We'd always had weird stuff happen, be it sounds in the attic, what could have been footsteps up the stairs at night, weird shadows. And when it was late at night downstairs, my dog would growl at seemingly nothing, that kind of thing. Now, I always thought it was bogus, while my mum was a real there's something here kind of person. My room had this narrow hallway as you open the door, maybe 5-6 feet long, where I had a little bookshelf, put my shoes, etc. Imagine walking into the room and you can see about half of it. And as soon as you open the door and then you take a few steps in, you see the entire room. My bed was on the exact opposite wall of the hallway. So all I could see while sitting on my bed watching TV was the end of the hallway and my closet. It was maybe 9 or 10 at night and I was watching a show, not thinking about much, and I thought I heard my bedroom door open. So I looked over towards the area where the end of the little hallway met my room. There was nothing. Didn't see a thing. So I thought, weird, sounded like my door opened. I kept watching TV, and no more than a minute later, I heard very clear footsteps in the hallway. So I glanced back over with a confused face on. Must be my little sister trying to sneak up on me. So I stare over there for a few minutes. Still nothing. Okay then. Another minute goes by, and I see out of my peripheral vision, very, very slowly, a woman's head peer around the corner at the end of this little hallway and then look right at me. At this point, it was my mum, in my mind. She has long dark hair. It's probably 5'1", 5'2", so physically it seemed to resemble her completely. Again, completely dark in my room, other than the glow of the TV. So I just stared back. I couldn't really make out the face, but again, I was completely sure it was her just trying to fuck with me. So I actually gave back a what face, but nothing. Just stayed there peering back until I finally said, what? At this point, my mum quickly pulled her head back from around the corner. I sat there for a minute and thought, what is she doing right now? But I heard nothing. No steps, no door, nothing. Then I got goosebumps. I was like, what the hell? Slowly got up, walked towards the hallway, and just as I got to the point in my room that I had seen her, I stopped and quickly looked around the corner towards my door, expecting to see my mum being a weirdo and crouching by the door to scare me or something. Nope, nothing. No one there, door closed, nobody had been there. I ran so fast into my mum's room, crying and begging her to admit that she'd just been in my room. She started crying too, lol. She said she hasn't been in there, but she knew this place was creepy. It turns out, years later, I discovered the entire area was a former Indian burial ground. So there's that. Who knows what the hell it was? It was the very, very slowly part for me and the peeping her head round. I think that is going to haunt me probably most of the evening tonight. I already have slept really badly the last 2 nights just because I've been hot, uncomfortable, restless legs. You know how it gets. That image, I'm so happy my room is not laid out like that in one slight iota, because if it was, I'd just sleep. I'd probably just sleep somewhere else. I would be out. I might even sleep on a park bench because it would make me feel better. I have a really active imagination. I don't really get scared a massive amount, if I'm honest. There are certain things that freak me out. And sometimes when I tell these stories, like the Black Eyed Children, like it really stuck with me because I thought that's such a real thing that could just happen. They could just knock at your door and you'd have to use your discernment to know if they're real or not. I don't really get scared, but that like slow peeking around the corner, just for some reason, that will do it for me. That's me gone then. This next story is from someone called Grudgingly Hufflepuff. And they say, this happened to my grandpa. My parents are pretty old, so my grandpa was born a long time ago, 1913 to be exact. Just a side note, my granddad is actually 94 on Monday. And he was born around like 1930 something. So massive shout out to my granddad. Absolutely love him so much. Anyway, this person says, this took place in Mexico, and there is just something about Mexico that makes it rife with activity. I don't know if it's because traditional folk magic and witchcraft is deeply integrated in the culture and practice there, especially in the past, or because the land has experienced a lot of wars, revolutions, and violence, or maybe it's a combination of both. I've always been interested in the paranormal since I was a kid, and it started with my father sharing his experiences with us growing up on a haunted ranch. I also used to go around my aunts, uncles, and grandparents as a kid and ask them if they'd ever experienced anything creepy. So I've collected a few stories over the years. So I'll start with my grandpa's. I'll start by saying my maternal grandfather wasn't a good person. He was a womanizer, a drinker, a gambler, and had a harsh upbringing. He was fairly young when this took place. I would say maybe 1930s. He'd gone out for the night drinking and gambling. Where he lived was very desolate and underdeveloped land. He lived on a ranch, and there were only small villages slash towns nearby that were miles and miles in between each other, with nothing but roads, dirt, and gravel paths, and lots of trees and land. People would usually either walk to town from their ranches or use horses. And on this night, my grandpa had gone out drinking and gambling, and once he'd run out of money, he made his way home on his horse. He was cutting through a wooded area when he noticed something near a small river. He noticed a young woman bathing herself there. She was very pretty and had long black hair going down her back and down to her thighs. She had her back to my grandpa. He walked his horse up closer to her, into the river. He said he grabbed her by the hair and she turned around to face him. When she turned, he said she had the face of a horse with red eyes, but the body of a woman. It scared the crap out of him, and he said it scared him sober, and he hightailed it out of there and raced all the way home. I'm so glad it scared the crap out of him. I'm very glad that it scared the crap out of him too, because I'm sorry, but what person goes up to a woman anyway and grabs her by the hair to turn her around to him? He was clearly going to do something untoward, wasn't he? Let's be honest. Maybe that's why they've said he was a womanizer and he wasn't a very nice person, so they can build that picture up of him. I've never heard that before. But this person goes on to tell us another story. And they say, this is my uncle's story. This is my mum's baby brother. And he told me this happened to him when he was a teen. So I'm going to say that this took place somewhere between the 1950s and the late 60s. I remember being young, about 10 or so, and loving ghost stories. So I asked him if he'd ever had a spooky experience. He told me that when he was a teenager, he and a few friends decided to go exploring in some caves. This was one of my grandfather's sons, so it was the same general area as the previous story, at least within the 10 to 20 mile radius. Again, lots of open land and miles away from the nearest neighbour or town. They made an afternoon of exploring the caves. My uncle said he found a bone in one of the caves. It was kind of long. Being a teen, he thought it was cool and decided to take it with him. After a while, him and his friends got hungry and weren't that far from the nearest town. They decided to grab something to eat at a nearby small mum and pop type place. I take it that's a cafe, I'm not sure. They had outdoor tables where he and his friends sat down to eat, and he propped the bone up on it. While they were there eating and drinking their sodas, he noticed a man that looked like he was wearing some sort of soldier's uniform, standing next to a tree about 20 to 30 feet away from him, just staring. He realized this man was missing a leg. The man raised his hand and pointed to the bone propped against the table. My uncle asked his friends if they could see the man across the way, but they couldn't. My uncle then got a bout of vertigo and fell to the ground, and he had a panic attack, telling his friends what he saw. My uncle has always been a very timid and anxious type person, so this really rocked him. He became pretty panic-stricken, and one of his friends had to stay with him while the rest decided it was best to take the bone back to the cave. I tried to get more info from my uncle, like how long the man stood standing there, what uniform was he wearing, what did it look like, and who he thought this was, but my mum stopped me. She said not to ask him any more questions because he looked like he was getting nervous, and they put this like annoyed face emoji. The next story happened to my dad. He grew up on a large 200-acre ranch in the same state. This land had been in the family since at least the 1800s. Again, this was underdeveloped, open land, miles away from the nearest neighbour. My father experienced lots on this ranch, but I've only got time to tell one more story, so I'll pick the most scariest in my opinion. This took place around the late 1940s. My dad was around 8 to 10 years old. It was the end of an evening, and my dad had just finished eating supper with his family. The houses at the time had different layout designs, where the rooms weren't connected to each other. They were separated, and you had to walk outside into the courtyard to get to another room. He went to what you'd call a lounge room. It was empty, and he was by himself when he walked in there. He went to lie down on the ground and rest. He didn't go to sleep, he just closed his eyes. Not long after that, he said he felt something touch his cheek. It felt like a furry paw rested on his face. He instantly sat up and looked around, but he was the only one in the room. The thick, heavy wooden doors were closed, and he definitely would have heard it creak open. They had no dogs and no neighbours for miles away. A few weeks passed, and again he found himself walking to the lounge area where he usually went to rest after supper. He entered the empty room, closed the door, and lay down on the ground to rest his eyes. Not sure how long he was resting before again he felt the furry paw on his cheek. This time he was quick. With his eyes still closed, he swiftly grabbed whatever touched his face. He grabbed it and he said it felt like an animal's leg or paw, maybe around the same size as a dog or coyote, but it dissipated while he was still grabbing it. He never got to see what it was. It's one of my favourite stories because it's so unique. That's creepy, but why are you going back into the lounge room if you know there's a really strange dog that likes to touch people's faces in there? People just do these strange things, don't they? Keep going back for more. This next story is from someone called Shaw General 9067. And they say, I had an ex who used to have night terrors all the time. He'd wake me up asking who was watching us in the dark corner of the room, or in a panic because of something only he could see. I was scared at the start, but it happened so frequently I got used to it, and I would just tell him to go back to sleep and laugh off in the morning. Over time, I started to feel like I could feel someone watching us while we slept, and I got to the point where I couldn't sleep in his childhood bedroom, they put in brackets, before we got our own place at all, because it was like I always felt something or someone was watching me. When we moved in together in our own place, he didn't have the terrors for a while, and I didn't have that feeling. But one night he woke me as he usually would and asked me, who's that? I told him to go back to sleep and rolled over, turning my back to him. Only when I turned, I saw a woman sitting on the edge of the bed with her back to us, looking over her shoulder at us. I panicked, naturally, and he panicked and started kicking and swinging towards her because he could normally write it off as a night terror, but because I could see it too, it broke that security he had of it in his head. And in a flurry of him swinging and kicking the blankets everywhere, she was gone, as if she wasn't there at all. I quickly turned the light on, and through tears, we discussed what we'd just seen. I didn't tell him what I'd seen to see if he would describe the exact same thing to me, and he did, down to the same hairstyle. However, he had the addition of cloaked figures at the bottom of his bed looking at us too. We weren't religious, but we brought in some religious items a family member had given us and slept with the lights on for weeks. It was absolutely terrifying. Ugh, that is so horrible. I am a massive believer that night terrors are not just science-based. I really believe that somehow they happen to people who have had emotional traumas in some way. I don't know if that's fact. I'm not saying it is, but the people that I know have had them have some kind of unresolved emotional trauma. And it's like these things are able to tap in and feed off of that wound with them. Like I've mentioned previously, I believe that somehow it opens up a gateway. And when you sleep and you're in between sleep and kind of being awake, they have this ability somehow to paralyze you or something, and you're able to see them, but then you can click back into your reality and it's like, oh, they're not real, but the bastards are real. I'm telling you, the people that have had these night terrors will tell you how real they are. I think I've told you my story with my night terror. I've only ever had one, and it was really strange because the night that I had it, I was talking to a guy at work who has night terrors, and he told me about this demon thing knocking his door down and like walking around his bed, and like he isn't able to move. And I went, I've never had a night terror, and was kind of mocking, like touch wood. I was kind of mocking, like, because I just thought I've never had one before. I wasn't taking the mick out of him, but I was, playing playful or whatever. And that's the first and last time I've ever had one. And I just remember being on my front in bed and in my dream, because essentially it is shown to you like a dream. Because it's like they can't actually do it to you in your reality, I don't think. I don't know how it works. But I just remember feeling so much fear. And it's like all of the air got sucked out of the room. And then it's like this thing was just like, I've got you now. It just kind of let me know in my head without saying words, I've got you. And I feel it pressing down on my shoulders and my like back. And then when I woke up, like all of my neck and shoulders and back were hurting. And obviously you could say it was because I was tense in my dream. I'm not, silly, but it was weird. And I don't believe in coincidences. So don't mock people who have night terrors. In fact, you probably should sage yourself after you spend time with them. Sorry if that's you. I'm not, singling you out. It's awful. Now, this next person is called Parafield Podcast, and they have replied to the previous story that I just told you about the woman sat on the bed. And they say, this hits close to home. I've dealt with sleep paralysis since I was a small child, probably around 2 or 3 years old. That's actually one of my earliest memories. But by the time I got to high school, it had become very involved. It wasn't just seeing someone standing at the end of my bed anymore. The experiences matured as I matured and became more complex and involved over time. I started seeing hooded figures and really grotesque kind of demonic entities. It wasn't simple anymore. I was getting dragged out of bed, waking up with handprints on me, scratches, bite marks, physical marks that were actually there. This went on until I was almost 30 years old. And honestly, this is just one of many stories I could tell, but they're all pretty complex. I'd mentioned this to friends before, and mostly they just brushed it off. I'd stayed at their houses over the years and things would happen there, but I did my best to hide it. I didn't want them to be scared or think I was weird or worry that they wouldn't want to be my friend anymore. I do my best to be quiet during these situations until it would stop. Then, one night, I was hanging out with my buddy AM. We had hung out all day, playing video games, chilling, whatever. It was around 2 a.m. and we decided to go to sleep. I had that feeling, that sense that a sleep paralysis night was coming. I remember thinking that I hope whatever happened wouldn't wake AM. We went to bed, and I don't know what time it was, but I woke up mid-paralysis with 6 robed figures around my bed, chanting, grabbing me, yanking me around. I could barely move. I could barely breathe. I was fighting through it in my head, saying, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave." I was getting this stabbing pain and pressure in my abdomen the whole time. In the middle of it, I managed to move my head just enough to look over, and AM was sitting straight up in the other bed, white as a sheet, jaw hanging open, frozen in fear. He wasn't sleeping. He was watching the whole thing happen. I finally got the words out and they left. So I'm guessing that he managed to say, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave." It was like someone turned on a vacuum. They all got sucked through my closet and the door physically slammed shut on its own. My pillow was up against the wall where the closet door is, so I could really feel and hear it. When I came to, AM was still sitting there freaking out, asking me what the hell just happened. I had to calm him down so we didn't wake my parents, and that's when it hit me. He saw it, not just heard me breathing weird or moving around. He saw them grabbing me, moving me on the bed, getting sucked into the closet, and that door slamming shut. The same thing I was seeing. That was the first time in my life anyone else had witnessed what I was going through. Up until that point, I genuinely thought it was all neurological, just me. Having someone else see it too changed everything about how I understood it. But after that night, AM never stayed with me again. It wasn't long after that our multi-year friendship just fizzled out. He stopped getting hold of me, stopped wanting to come over and hang out, and I can't say I blame him. It hurt at first, obviously, because he was my homie, but what he witnessed that night was terrifying. Before he left the next day, he told me he didn't know if he could come over anymore. He said he'd never seen anything like, and unfortunately after that, AM got pretty tied up into drugs and ended up in a really bad shape. That type of behavior started manifesting in him after that night, and I lost a good friend over it. Later on in life, when I started being more serious about dating and having girls stay the night, there were a few times I get that feeling that sleep paralysis episode was coming. I'd make up an excuse to get them to leave, like telling them my dad called needing something, or I had to go pick up my cousin from somewhere. I didn't want them to experience what I was experiencing or have them witness what AM witnessed. I was very protective of that. Then when I was in a relationship with my ex-fiance, she saw a lot of shit too because we lived together for 6 years. We dated for a while before we moved in together. What transpired there and what she witnessed was really crazy stuff. That's something I can get into later, but it was intense. So when you say you're now seeing what your boyfriend sees, even without having sleep paralysis yourself, I completely believe you. It's very different when someone else is in the room and confirms it's not just in your head and it is real. Has anyone here had a partner who's had sleep paralysis and you've seen something in the room too? Let me know, because that would be super freaky and a really cool episode to do. I'd love that. This next story is from someone called the JC3, and they wrote it 8 years ago. And they say, "This is a true story I experienced as a kid. When I was around 11, 12 years old, I had a bedroom downstairs at my parents' house. One morning, I woke early. It was still dark enough that I couldn't clearly see my room, but early enough that I could see the sun creeping in through my window. Anyway, I woke up that morning to a figure in my doorway that looked like they were wearing a white dressing gown, just standing there. At the time, I thought it was my mother about to wake me up for school. Confused, I asked her, "What are you doing, Mum?" Without a reply, this figure seemed to just back out of my room. So I got out of bed and walked to my door and couldn't see it anymore. Just to the right outside my room was the downstairs bathroom. To the left, the stairs upstairs, and ahead, a hallway to the rumpus room with the door to under the house. Now, listen, I didn't know what a rumpus room is because I never heard of that language in my entire life before. So let me tell you what Google says a rumpus room is. It's a casual room in a house used for games, parties, and noisy activities. Everyone needs a rumpus room. First of all, I was like, what do you do in a rumpus room? You rumping? You're doing naughty things? What is it? But now I can see it's basically a really cool den, right? Anyway, I didn't know what it was. Now you know what it is. If you didn't know what it was, you're welcome. If you did, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry that I've let you down. A quick look up the stairs, and in the bathroom, I couldn't see my mum. So back to bed I went. Later that morning, I went upstairs for breakfast and to get ready for school. At breakfast, I asked Mum what she was doing downstairs earlier, and she replied saying that she hadn't been downstairs at all this morning. After arguing with her about how I knew it was her because I saw her in her dressing gown, she promised me that she had not been downstairs at all. I went downstairs before I went to school and walked into the rumpus to see the door under the house was wide open. The scary part of it all was that my parents had one of these locking latches on the door because during windy nights the wind would blow the door open. The door's lock was still on the latch and locked, so it should have been impossible for that door to have opened. For a long time after that, I refused to walk near that door and often asked my mother to come check that door before I went to bed to make sure it was shut, locked, and couldn't be opened. My parents tried telling me I was probably dreaming, but I know I was awake and convinced about this figure standing in my doorway. Good God. I wouldn't stay down there anymore. I'd make sure I go up to where everyone else is. It's not worth it, is it? Forget a rumpus room. You know, it might sound fun. It's not. The ghosts just do what they want there. And how the hell does a lock that shouldn't be unlocked open for ghosts? How does it open for ghosts? And like he just sees it open. What are they like? You know, when you just see a film and you see this lovely, really romantic part happen and like they skip off into the sunset and whatever, or you see something really work out for someone, a job goes really well, and then the film ends and you feel lovely. What they're not showing you is the bit where it's like, oh, the ghost is like, bloody hell, how do I get this back together so they don't know I've been here? Trying to poke their head through the door while their body is on the other side of the door, reaching around, trying to like sort the lock out, and oh, they're sweating, ghost sweat. You know, it's all going on. They don't show you those bits, so you get this perfect arrived moment of horror. And it's like you don't see all of the hilarious bits in between. I should like to think that there was a hilarious bit in between. And if you have an imagination as well, please tell me how you think that happened in the comments. And the most hilarious comment wins. I don't know what you win yet, but you win something, okay? You win something. Now, this is the last story, and it's from Guardian Boy. And I loved it. And he says, I was stationed in England about 3 years ago. I worked in a secure facility, which during the day was buzzing with people, military, contractors, and government civilians. It was a fenced in facility on the base, which was also fenced and had a few different layers of security in the building itself that you had to go through. On top of that, we also had our own entry point, ECP, with patrols. My point, getting into the building was only possible if you either had a badge on you or you blew a hole in it, nothing in between. At night, however, it was a ghost town, usually only between 2 and 4 people. Still had patrols, but they were outside and we never spoke to them unless there was a problem, and it was a huge facility. One night, there's 3 of us working on a night shift, and we have an array of monitors in there that display live feeds from cameras all over the compound. It was one of those where it would show for about 10 seconds, flip to the next feed, and then roll through and repeat them. One night, we get a call from the ECP. They had motion alarms going off in one of the equipment rooms, which means one of us had to go check it out. Lucky me, my supervisor sends me. I get to the equipment room, there's nobody in sight. I pick up the phone, call over my supervisor, tell him there's nothing here. Then I call the ECP and ask them if they can see me on the feed. They respond with the following words: we have 2 of you. I just sort of looked up at the camera and tried to be as nonchalant as I could and asked, where do you see the other guy? And I get back, at about your 5 o'clock, me. Describe him, them. Can't make out his face, but about 6 feet tall. In BDUs, looks like a lifter. Just so you guys know, BDUs is battle dress uniforms. I've just Googled it. I had no idea what that was either, because we're just civvies, aren't we? Sorry to the ones who aren't civvies, but most of us are. And then they've put a note. At this point, BDUs had not been our uniform for around 4 years. Now they say, I turn around and point and ask, right there? ECP confirms it. There's nobody fucking there. I asked if they had spoken to the ops floor yet. They said no. So I hung up and called, told my supervisor to look at the equipment room feed, and he just says, who the fuck is that? I hung up the phone and bolted out of there and secured the door behind me, which was a £2,000 blast door. I got back to the ops floor. I was thinking they were fucking with me. But when I got through the door, security forces are already inside. My supervisor had called them in. So they go out there with me behind them because they still needed to be escorted. So there's 3 guys with their M4s out and little old me with nothing but a Leatherman on my belt behind them. I re-access the equipment room door and they go in. They eventually clear the room. The phone in the equipment room rings and I pick it up. There are motion alarms going off all over the facility now, all in places that have been fully sealed and secured all night. We ended up calling the main base command post to tell them we have a problem. Security force spends the next hour and a half clearing the rest of the facility. At this point, we have already notified our commander and his staff, so everybody is tracking it. Unfortunately, the video feed didn't record at the time, so we had nothing to go back to review and see what they saw. But the ECP supervisor on duty and my supervisor, both E7s, had seen it separately. And the motion detector systems did record, and we were able to at least have that confirmation that something happened. Each alarm was on its own individual circuit and hardwired directly into the ECP. No networks, nothing digital. 1 or 2 flipping out, fine, but there were over 30 that detected something moving around, to include the low sensitivity detectors, i.e. in order to trip those, you've got to have something large moving a lot, a human walking around, a medium-sized animal, etc. All of this happened just after midnight, so we were stuck in this facility afterwards for about another 4 hours until the morning crew came to relieve us. But because of everything that happened, we had to debrief the commander and his staff. So that meant that we didn't get out of there for like another 2 or 3 hours after our 12-hour shift ended. To this day, nobody knows what it was. Also, something that we didn't think about at the time, but that makes me kind of shiver now. These weren't low-quality cameras. They said they couldn't make out the face. You could practically count eyelashes on people's face from 40 feet away with those cameras. They could see my face clear as day, but they couldn't make out the other guys. I just love that story. Isn't it brilliant? I love military stories. I really do. I think I'm going to try and find some military stories for my next podcast, because I have been sent lots of stories with people who are like, I'm skeptical. I've been in the army for a very long time, but this happened to me. And they're like questioning all of their beliefs. It's brilliant. That's all I've got time for. But if you've got a ghost story, send it to me, the Darkling Chronicles 25 at gmail.com. I'll catch you guys in the next one.